clatter of a misplaced fork was all it took. Amara Jones, a black waitress with a future as vast as her dreams, mistakenly served the wrong table in a high-end restaurant. A simple error in judgment. She had no idea that a quiet billionaire was watching her every move, or that this single tiny mistake was about to send her life and her heart spiraling into a world she never knew existed. I want to specially welcome you to the Powder Room Tales, the place where we don't just tell stories, we manufacture unforgettable ones with you in mind. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe right now and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single secret from the Powder Room. Before we dive in, we want to know, where in the world are you watching us from? Drop your location in the comments and join our growing family of story lovers. We have a new tale coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. May God bless every one of you, my amazing Powder Room Tales family, with a long, joyful, and fulfilled life. Now let's get into today's main story. Amara's life was a masterclass in controlled chaos. For 10 hours a day, she moved with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a surgeon through the high-end dining room of the Gilded Fork, a restaurant where the prices of the entrees could fund her small business dreams for a month. She was a study in contrasts, her uniform crisp and white against the weary ache in her feet, the serene smile she offered to demanding patrons against the quiet urgency in her mind. Every tip was a brick in the foundation of her future, a future where she wouldn't have to carry heavy trays or feign politeness. She was saving to open a small bakery, a place that would smell of cinnamon and comfort, a place she could truly call her own. This night, a Friday, felt particularly draining. The dining room was a sea of murmuring conversations and clinking glasses. Amara had been on her feet for 9 hours, and the exhaustion was a dull throb in her shoulders. She was halfway through a shift that was a blur of faces, orders, and polite nods. She saw herself as a ghost in this room of wealth, a necessary but invisible component of their perfect evening. The patrons saw her uniform, not her ambition. They saw a service, not a dream. She was used to it. She had built a fortress of resilience around her heart, a wall that kept the emotional distance between her world and theirs. Across the room, in a secluded corner booth, Benjamin Sterling was a world apart, not just from the restaurant, but from the world itself. At 38, he was a man who lived in the ether of numbers and digital assets, the architect of a tech empire that spanned continents. He was handsome in a way that was almost intimidating, chiseled features, a sharp, analytical gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He was dining alone, a choice he made, not out of a lack of company, but out of a profound distrust of it. His life was a constant negotiation of intentions, a game of spotting the opportunistic from the genuine. People were drawn to his fortune, not to him, and he had grown weary of the pretense. Tonight, he was here to escape the noise of his world, to be an observer rather than the observed. He had chosen this quiet booth, a perfect vantage point, to watch the ebb and flow of humanity. He saw her first as a flash of white in the periphery. Amara, a single figure of efficiency, moving with a practiced grace that was a beautiful counterpoint to the hurried, clumsy energy of the other staff. He noticed the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she spoke to a particularly demanding couple. He saw the slight wince as she lifted a heavy tray. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was looking at a person. He saw her ambition in the subtle set of her jaw, and the way her shoulders were always just a little too tense. He saw her, and for the first time, in a very long time, he was intrigued. His life was a series of grand gestures that lacked meaning. He owned private jets, mansions in a dozen countries, and art he had never truly looked at. But he felt a pull toward her, a woman whose world felt so honest, so tangible. He felt a profound loneliness that even his closest confidantes could not see. He was searching for a connection that money couldn't buy, a soul that saw him as something other than an account balance. He saw that soul in the silent determination of Amara, The climax of the first act began with a simple order. A table of boisterous, laughing businessmen wanted a bottle of their most expensive champagne, an order that would add a considerable sum to Amara's tip jar. Amara, already exhausted and mentally replaying the day's events, was given the table number. She took the bottle, her hands trembling with a mix of excitement and fatigue, and moved through the room with a renewed sense of purpose. Her eyes, however, were focused on the numbers on the receipt. She walked to the wrong table, to a quiet corner where she saw a lone, distinguished man watching her. Her mind, in its weary state, registered the number in her hand with the number on his table. They were the same. She placed the bottle on his table. Benjamin, who had been watching her, was startled. He didn't order champagne. He raised an eyebrow, about to correct her, but she simply smiled, a genuine, tired but sincere smile, and said, "Enjoy your evening, sir." The smile was so real, so different from the one she used on her customers. It was the smile of a woman who was tired, but who still believed in the goodness of people. In that moment, something shifted inside of Benjamin. He said nothing. He simply watched her walk away, and a new plan, an audacious, beautiful plan, began to form in his mind. The numbers on the receipt and the numbers on his table were not the same. She had served the wrong table. He reached for his phone, a smirk playing on his lips. His world and hers had just collided, and neither of them would ever be the same. How do Amara's exhaustion and Benjamin's loneliness, though born from completely different circumstances, serve as a common ground for their characters? If you found this introduction captivating, don't miss what happens next. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Benjamin Sterling, a man who saw the world in data points and algorithms, was captivated by a single beautiful error. He had not corrected Amara. He had not pointed out that the $500 bottle of vintage champagne was not for his table but for the loud, laughing businessmen in the corner. He had simply let her go, watched her move with her graceful, tired purpose, and in his silence an impossible plan began to form. He saw not a waitress who had made a mistake, but a woman who in her exhaustion had offered him a real, unpracticed smile. That smile was more valuable to him than any number on a balance sheet. It was a glimpse into a soul unburdened by the artifice of his world. He knew with an uncanny certainty that he had to know her. He left the restaurant without a word to the manager, slipping a $1,000 bill under the empty champagne bottle he had never opened, a quiet, anonymous tip for the waitress who had accidentally changed his life. He made a note of her name from the receipt he had found, and by the time he was in his car, his team was already on a mission. Find me everything you can on an Amara Jones, a waitress at the Gilded Fork, he instructed his personal assistant over the phone, his voice a low, commanding rumble. His world, a world of unimaginable power and efficiency, was now bent to a single romantic purpose. Amara, meanwhile, was in the back of the kitchen, her heart hammering with a mix of fear and excitement. The table she thought she had served was still empty, its inhabitants having left long ago. She checked the receipt again, the numbers blurring in her vision. Table 12. She had served table 12. There were no other tables with that number. And yet she had been so sure. The night had ended in a haze of confusion, and she had gone home, exhausted and bewildered. She wouldn't know until the next day that a massive tip had been found and attributed to her, and the champagne had mysteriously disappeared. It was a bizarre, bewildering event, a small ripple that would soon become a tidal wave. Benjamin, with the precision of a master strategist, orchestrated their next meeting. He didn't want to show up at her job again. That would be presumptuous, and it would put her in a difficult position. Instead, he found her rhythm, a small slice of her real life that was separate from the restaurant. She spent her mornings at a small, unassuming coffee shop, hunched over a well-worn notebook, sketching designs for her future bakery. Benjamin arrived one morning, dressed in clothes that were a stark contrast to his business attire, a simple button-down shirt and jeans. He looked normal. He sat at a table nearby, his laptop open, a prop for his real purpose to watch her. Their first real conversation was as simple and unforced as her smile had been. He accidentally spilled his coffee, a clumsy and uncharacteristic move for him, which splashed across her sketchbook. He apologized profusely, and in her kindness, she assured him it was no big deal. "It was old anyway," she said with a warm laugh. She wiped up the spill, and he, in an act that felt both planned and entirely spontaneous, offered to buy her a new one. They sat and talked. He didn't mention the restaurant, didn't mention his job, and didn't mention the champagne. He simply asked her about her sketches, about her dreams. Amara, usually guarded and cautious, found herself opening up to this stranger. He was a good listener. He didn't interrupt. He asked thoughtful questions that went beyond the surface. He was not like the men she had met before, men who were more interested in impressing her than in knowing her. He was a quiet, unassuming man who seemed to genuinely care about her ambitions. He saw her sketches of the bakery and asked her about the kind of bread she wanted to bake. "Something that makes people feel at home," she said, her eyes lighting up with a passion she rarely showed to strangers. "Something that smells like love." Their connection deepened over the next few weeks, forged in the intimate space of that small cafe. They would meet every morning. She would show him her new sketches. He would tell her about his quiet life, his love for old books, and his small, everyday pleasures. Benjamin was a master of misdirection, a virtuoso of omission. He spoke of his work in a vague, abstract way, never giving her a name, a company, or a location. He spoke of his travels as if they were a necessity rather than a luxury. He was a man who loved quiet mornings, who savored good coffee, and who was genuinely excited about the intricacies of her bakery blueprints. He was in essence the man she had always dreamed of meeting. One afternoon, a powerful thunderstorm rolled through the city. Amara's small car wouldn't start. She was stranded at the cafe, her frustration and exhaustion mounting. Benjamin, without a moment's hesitation, offered to give her a ride home. She hesitated, her built-in caution kicking in, but the look in his eyes, a look of pure, uncomplicated concern, was enough to quiet her fears. He didn't call for a town car or a driver. He had an unassuming vehicle parked down the street, and they drove through the rain, the sound of the wipers, a rhythmic beat to their comfortable silence. As they sat in the car, waiting for the rain to subside, Amara looked at him. The streetlights from outside cast a gentle, warm glow on his face. He was not a Prince Charming, he was just a man. He was kind, he was patient, and he was listening. He was just a quiet man who had a genuine interest in her. He wasn't a hero, he was just a human being who had offered her a ride in the rain, and for Amara that was more than enough. In that quiet, vulnerable moment, as the rain drummed against the car, she realized she was falling in love with him. She was not falling for a man with a fancy car or a big house. She was falling for the quiet, kind, and gentle soul who had offered to share his umbrella with her. And in that moment, her fate, her heart, and her future was sealed. He had succeeded in his first mission. He had gotten her to fall for the man, not the money. The only problem was, his biggest secret was still waiting to be revealed. How does Benjamin's deliberate effort to present a normal life to Amara paradoxically create a love that is more real than any grand gesture could have inspired? Amara is falling in love, but what happens when she discovers the truth? Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The quiet, comfortable love that had blossomed between Amara and Benjamin was now under siege, not from the outside world, but from the insidious enemy of their own minds, doubt. For Amara, the terrifying realization that she was in love with Benjamin brought with it a cascade of insecurities she had never truly faced before. She had fallen for a man who seemed so comfortable in his skin, so content with his life, a man who spoke of his work in such a vague, abstract way she couldn't even begin to imagine what he did. She, on the other hand, was a woman with a life defined by hard work, aching feet, and the smell of hot coffee. Her dreams, once a source of pride, now felt small and insignificant in the face of his vast, unknown world. She started to pull away, her once eager responses to his texts now clipped and delayed. Their morning coffee dates, once a sanctuary, now felt strained. She would find herself staring at her worn, calloused hands, hands that had carried thousands of trays and washed countless dishes, and then she would look at his strong, clean, and unburdened by labor. He seemed to sense her withdrawal, his gentle questions, "Is everything okay? Did I do something?" only made her feel worse. She couldn't tell him the truth, that she was terrified. Terrified that she wasn't good enough, that this was all just a temporary amusement for a man who would eventually go back to his life of ease, leaving her to the reality of hers. The emotional weight of her withdrawal was a physical thing. She found herself avoiding his calls, her heart thumping in her chest with a mix of longing and fear. She was so afraid of the pain of an inevitable ending that she had chosen to end it herself before it had a chance to truly begin. For Benjamin, sensing Amara's quiet retreat was like watching a beautiful ship sail away from him. He knew exactly what it was. The very fear that had driven his lie was now driving her away. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry, but he was powerless against her silence. Every text he sent, every unanswered call, felt like a judgment against his secret. The more he loved her, the more he feared the moment of truth. He replayed the betrayal of his past in his mind, the cold, calculating look on a woman's face when he had told her his carefully constructed lie. He couldn't go through that again, but he couldn't keep lying either. The two worlds he had built, the opulent life of Benjamin Sterling and the quiet life of the man who loved a waitress, were beginning to tear him apart. The external pressure came in the form of a cruel, casual observation. One evening, as Amara was leaving her shift, a fellow waitress, a young woman named Kemi, made a snide remark. "Word around the kitchen is you've got yourself a sugar daddy, Amara. Haven't seen you this happy in a long time." The comment was a punch to the gut. Amara felt her cheeks burn with shame. She knew Kemi was just teasing, but the words, the casual assumption that her happiness was tied to a man's wallet, hit a raw nerve. It was the same assumption that had tormented Benjamin for years. The sting of the word sugar daddy was a branding iron searing her deepest insecurities. She ran to her small apartment, the cruel words replaying in her mind, fueling her resolve to end whatever it was with Benjamin before anyone else could attach a price tag to their love. Meanwhile, Benjamin's real world was demanding his full attention. His company was in the final stages of a massive merger, and the negotiations were tense and demanding. He was on a constant stream of calls and meetings, the language of billions of dollars a constant hum in his ears. It was a world of private jets and high-stakes dinners, a world that was so opposed to Amara's, it felt like a different universe. He couldn't even tell her what he was doing, and his inability to be honest with her felt like a fresh wound every time she asked about his day. The irony was devastating. His true work was preventing him from spending time with the only person who had ever made his work feel meaningless. The breaking point arrived in the form of a forced choice. The merger was complete, and his business partner arranged a celebration in Paris. It wasn't an option. It was a non-negotiable event he had to attend. As he sat in his sleek office, the cityscape of his power stretching out below him, he stared at a photograph of the Eiffel Tower on his computer screen. The symbol of grand, impossible love. A thought struck him, audacious and terrifying. This trip was his opportunity. He had to risk it all. He had to tell her the truth. No matter the cost, he would invite her to Paris. He would show her a part of his world, not to impress her, but to be honest with her. He sent her a text, his heart pounding in his chest. "I have to go to Paris for a few days. I know you've been distant, and I understand if you say no, but I want you to come with me. I want to tell you something important." The message was a leap of faith, an offering of his true self. He had laid his cards on the table. He was giving her a choice to either walk away from the mystery and the man she had come to love, or to take a terrifying leap of faith into the unknown, a journey that would either end in a grand love story or a devastating heartbreak. Amara's self-doubt and Benjamin's fear of the past are both products of their relationship with wealth and social class. How do these parallel anxieties threaten to destroy their chance at love? Will Amara take a chance on a mysterious man and a life-changing trip to Paris? Well, we will find out. Like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories from the powder room. The plane ticket lay on Amara's small kitchen table, a crisp white rectangle of possibility that felt more like a test than an invitation. For a full 24 hours, it was all she could think about. The question that had fueled her self-doubt, "Am I enough?" was now screaming in her mind. Paris. The name itself was a whisper of a life she had only ever seen in movies, a city of grand gestures and fairy tale romances. And here she was, a waitress from Ghana, being offered a ticket there by a man whose world she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her friends and family, when she cautiously told them about the offer, were split. Some saw it as a dream come true, an opportunity that was a blessing from God. Others, more grounded in the harsh realities of their world, saw it as a trap, a dangerous risk with a man who was still largely a stranger. Ultimately, it wasn't the promise of Paris that made her decision. It was the memory of his eyes, filled with a desperate, naked hope when he had asked her to come. He wasn't asking her to join him for a vacation. He was asking her to trust him with something important. And after all, she had a dream of her own. A dream that had been stalled by fear and self-doubt. Taking this leap, she reasoned, was the only way to prove to herself that she was capable of a courage that transcended her small, safe world. She sent him a simple text. "Yes, I'll come." The journey itself was a surreal, out-of-body experience. The private jet that picked her up felt like a dream, a vessel from a different dimension. She was ushered into a cabin with plush leather seats, fine-grained wood paneling, and an attendant who offered her anything she could desire. She held her humble travel bag tightly in her lap, her knuckles white, the worn fabric a small, tangible reminder of the world she had left behind. Benjamin was waiting for her on board, his presence a calm anchor in the swirling sea of luxury. He didn't say a word about the jet. He simply smiled, a soft, genuine smile that said, "I'm glad you're here." He spent the entire flight talking to her about her bakery plans, his interest so focused that the private jet, the opulent surroundings, and the unreality of their situation faded into a quiet backdrop. Landing in Paris was like stepping into a movie. The crisp, clean air, the language that danced on the wind, the sheer, breathtaking beauty of the city. It was overwhelming. He had a car waiting, but it wasn't a flashy limousine. It was a comfortable, understated vehicle that blended in with the city's traffic. His apartment, however, was a different story. It was a sprawling, modern masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city, with the Eiffel Tower, a glittering, iconic sentinel in the distance. Amara stepped inside, and a wave of vertigo hit her. This was not a life. This was a fantasy. She felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if she were an actress in a play, wearing a costume that didn't fit. She didn't belong here. Benjamin, ever observant, saw the panic in her eyes. He saw the way she held her bag, as if it were a shield. Without a word, he took her hand. "Come," he said, his voice gentle. He led her away from the vast, intimidating space, past rooms filled with furniture that looked like art, and into a small, simple bedroom that felt like a sanctuary. The room was not opulent. It was cozy, filled with books and a comfortable bed. "This is my room," he said, his voice low. "And this," he pointed to a smaller, more Spartan room with a simple bed, "is yours." He was not trying to impress her. He was trying to ground her. "My life is not always like this," he said, his voice earnest. "This is just part of the job. I promise, if you give me a chance, I'll show you the real me." Their forced proximity in this beautiful foreign city became a crucible for their love. He didn't take her to fancy restaurants or lavish galas. Instead, he took her to a local market, a bustling labyrinth of colors, sounds and smells. They walked for hours, talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to the stall owners he knew by name. He was a different man here, relaxed, unburdened, and utterly present. He spoke of his love for the city, of its rich history, and of the secret alleyways and hidden gardens he had discovered. Amara, in turn, told him about her plans for her bakery, the kind of bread she wanted to bake, and the way she imagined her shop would smell of cinnamon and comfort. They were two souls, walking through a foreign city, sharing their most authentic selves. One evening, as they sat in a tiny rustic bistro, the air filled with the murmur of French conversations, Amara finally gathered the courage to ask, "What do you actually do?" she asked, her voice a whisper, her heart pounding. "You're always so busy. And this place, it's so big." Benjamin's hand, which had been resting on the table, reached for hers. His thumb began to trace a slow, gentle pattern on her skin. He looked her in the eyes, his own filled with a mix of deep, profound love and a terrifying fear. "Amara," he began, "there's something I need to tell you. I'm not who you think I am." He was about to tell her. He was about to lay all his cards on the table. But at that exact moment, his phone rang, a high-pitched, insistent sound that shattered the quiet intimacy. He winced, looking at the screen, and sighed. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I have to take this. It's urgent." He walked away, a business call, taking precedence over the most important conversation of his life. Amara was left alone at the table, the half-eaten food now a cold, unwelcome presence. She looked around the small bistro, at the families and lovers laughing, and felt a profound, aching loneliness. The man she was falling in love with, the man who was so gentle and kind, was also a man who had a phone call that could pull him away at a moment's notice. She felt the truth of his words, "My life is not always like this." But she also felt a chilling premonition. The truth was far bigger than she could ever imagine. Paris is a city of dreams and fantasy. How does its beautiful facade highlight both the romance of Amara and Benjamin's connection and the painful reality of their different worlds? Benjamin is on the verge of telling the truth, but what will happen when Amara finally learns who he really is? Don't miss the next act. Like and subscribe. Benjamin returned from his phone call, his face a grim mask of resolve. The urgency of his real life had faded into a meaningless buzz, eclipsed by the sheer importance of the conversation he had interrupted. He saw the doubt in Amara's eyes, the painful, silent question she hadn't asked. He knew that if he let this moment pass, he would lose her forever. He would rather risk her anger than lose her trust. He took her hand, his voice a low, earnest whisper, "Come with me." He didn't take her back to the opulent apartment. Instead, he led her to a quiet, secluded corner of the Louvre Museum, a place far from the bustling crowds, where a sculpture of two lovers, eternally intertwined, stood in quiet stillness. The marble was cold and smooth beneath their fingertips. The world had gone quiet just for them. "The phone call," he began, his voice surprisingly calm, "was from my business partner. He was calling about a deal worth over $1 billion. He was calling me because I own the company. Amara's face, which had been open and expectant, went completely still. She didn't laugh. She didn't scream. She just looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of dawning horror and shock. He plunged forward, desperate to get the words out. "I'm not who you think I am, Amara. I don't work in an office. I own the building. My small life is a lie. My apartment is a fake. The reason I don't talk about my work, it's because I'm a reclusive billionaire. I am one of the wealthiest men in the world." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, a chilling, monumental truth. Amara said nothing. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a heartbreaking, quiet sadness that cut him deeper than any accusation could. He confessed it all, the words pouring out of him like a flood. He told her about his first love, a woman named Clarissa, a beautiful socialite who was fascinated by his success. He had believed her love was real, but a nagging doubt, a constant fear of being used, had gnawed at him. He had orchestrated a fake financial collapse, a test to see if she would stay. In a brutal, vivid flashback, he recounted the scene in their lavish penthouse. Clarissa's face, once beautiful and loving, had contorted into a mask of pure greed. "You're a failure, Benjamin. This is not the life I signed up for," she had screamed, her fury not at his losses, but at the loss of her opulent lifestyle. She had left him the very next day, taking a significant part of his fortune and shattering his belief in true love. He looked at Amara, his face etched with the pain of the memory. "After that I made a vow. I would never be loved for my money again. I built a life to hide myself. I was a ghost. I was a man who had everything but who had no one. Then I saw you in that restaurant. And you were so real. I knew I had to get close to you. I had to see if you would love the man with nothing, because I was terrified you would be just like her." The confession hung heavy in the air. For a long, silent moment, Amara just looked at him, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. The beautiful man she had fallen in love with, in a coffee shop, was not real. He was a character in a play, a part of a test. She was not a gold digger, but she had been made to feel like a fool. "So I was a test?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was I just a lab rat in your social experiment, Benjamin? Did my love, my dreams, my life, did it all just serve to prove that I wasn't like her?" He reached for her hand, his own trembling. "No," he said, his voice raw with regret. "At first, maybe, it was an instinct, but it changed, Amara. It changed the moment I saw you sketching your bakery. It changed when you laughed at my clumsy coffee spill. It changed when I saw you, the real you, and I realized I was falling in love with a woman who had a soul as beautiful as her smile. The lie was never about tricking you. It was about protecting myself from losing the one thing I ever truly wanted. My fear almost cost me everything." He was baring his soul, his fear and his love laid bare on the floor of the museum. Amara saw the profound truth in his eyes, a depth of loneliness she had only ever imagined. She saw that he was, in a way, as much a victim of his wealth as she was of her lack of it, but she also saw his betrayal. He had judged her before he even knew her. He had assumed she would fail the test, and in doing so, he had risked breaking her heart. The magic of Paris faded, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. The love was there, but it was now clouded by a devastating secret. She turned away from him, her heart aching. The dream was gone, and a complicated, painful reality had taken its place. She was alone with her thoughts in a foreign city, forced to reckon with the fact that the man she loved was not just a billionaire. He was a broken man, and his fear had just broken her. Benjamin's fear of love is a product of his past. How does his confession force Amara to question not just their relationship, but also her own value in a world she doesn't belong to? The truth is out. What will Amara do Will she walk away from the broken man who loves her? Let's get into it. Like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. The confession in the museum was a truth bomb that had detonated, leaving Amara to pick through the emotional shrapnel. She walked out of the Louvre, leaving Benjamin standing alone with his shame and his secrets. The city of Paris, which just moments ago had felt like a stage for a grand romance, now felt like a gilded cage. Every beautiful building, every statue, every sign of immense wealth felt like a mocking reminder of the lie she had been living. She wandered the streets, her mind racing, a whirlwind of betrayal, hurt, and a complicated, agonizing love. The man she had fallen for wasn't a humble, kind soul. He was a master of deception, a strategist who had been testing her all along. The pain was a physical ache in her chest, a profound sense of loss for a man who had never truly existed. Benjamin let her go. He didn't follow her. He knew she needed space, not another grand gesture or a forced explanation. He went back to his opulent apartment, a place that now felt more like a prison than a home. The wealth that had once been his shield now felt like a curse, a chain that had bound him to a life of loneliness. He looked out at the glittering cityscape, at the world he owned, and felt utterly empty. He had risked everything for a love that seemed real, and in the end, his own fear had cost him the very thing he wanted. He didn't call her. He simply sat in the silent room, waiting for a sign, for a message, for anything that told him she hadn't left him forever. The first step toward reconciliation, a slow and agonizing crawl, came hours later. Amara, after walking for what felt like a lifetime, found herself in a small, unassuming cafe, a place that reminded her of the one where they had first met. She sat at a small table, a cup of bitter coffee in her hands, and pulled out her phone. Her finger hovered over his name. He hadn't called, he hadn't texted. His silence was a new kind of honesty. He was letting her choose. She typed a message, her fingers trembling. "I need to talk to you." "Not there. Meet me here." She sent him the address of the cafe. It was a test of a different kind, a test of his sincerity. Would he leave his lavish world to meet her in a place of her choosing, on her terms? He arrived within the hour, dressed in the same simple clothes he had worn in the coffee shop in Ghana. He saw her, and a profound wave of relief washed over his face, so palpable it was almost physical. He sat down, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was full of the questions they were both afraid to ask. Amara was the first to break the quiet. "Tell me about it," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Not about the money, not about the ex-wife. Tell me about the lie. Tell me about what it's like to be you when you're not playing a part." Benjamin sighed, a heavy, weary sound that came from the depths of his soul. "It's lonely," he began, his gaze fixed on the table, "so incredibly lonely. My life is a series of transactions. People see me, and they see a dollar sign. My friends are business partners. My relationships are calculated risks. I've always been an observer, not a participant. My wealth has been my greatest shield and my heaviest burden. It's a constant weight, a constant fear, the constant question, what if it all goes away? Who would stay?" His voice was raw, stripped of all artifice. He was confessing not just his secret, but the profound human loneliness that had created it. For the first time, Amara saw the weight of his world. She didn't see a man who had everything. She saw a man who had nothing but his money. She saw the fear in his eyes, the deep-seated vulnerability that had led him to live a lie. And in that moment, the anger and betrayal began to dissipate, replaced by a profound and overwhelming empathy. "I was terrified too," she confessed, her voice a low, earnest whisper. "I was afraid of being with you because I thought I wasn't enough. I thought my dreams were too small for your life, And when I saw the news, I thought you were just using me. I thought you were a fool, playing a game, and I was just the unfortunate pawn who fell in love." He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I was a fool," he said, his eyes finally meeting hers, "but the only game I was playing was with myself, and I was losing. I was losing the one person who saw me as more than just a name. You saw me, you saw the quiet man who loved coffee and old books. You saw the heart of me, a heart I had kept hidden for years." The conversation continued for hours, moving from the weight of his wealth to the details of her future bakery, from the loneliness of his life to the warmth of her family. They talked not as a billionaire and a waitress, but as two human beings, flawed and vulnerable, finally seeing each other for who they truly were. As the evening wore on, the air between them shifted. The tension that had defined their relationship was replaced by a fragile but very real bond. He didn't promise her a fairy tale ending, and she didn't ask for one. They had a foundation now, not of comfort or wealth, but of difficult truths and shared vulnerabilities. The lie was gone, and what was left was a connection that felt more real, more terrifying, and more precious than either of them had ever imagined. They had survived the truth, and a new, more powerful love, born of honesty and forgiveness, was about to begin. In this moment of raw honesty, what is the most significant obstacle they overcome? The revelation of his wealth, or the revelation of their own shared fears of inadequacy and trust? They've found a new, honest connection, but will it be enough to survive the public eye? Don't miss the continuation. Like and subscribe for more intriguing stories. The fragile bond forged in the quiet Parisian cafe was strong enough to weather the initial shock of Benjamin's secret, but it was wholly unprepared for the relentless storm of public scrutiny back in Ghana. Their return was not discreet. Benjamin, in his newfound commitment to honesty with Amara, had abandoned his usual cloak of anonymity. He arrived at Kotoka International Airport, not in a private jet, though it had brought them to Ghana, but disembarking from a commercial first-class flight, hand in hand with Amara, a choice made to appear less ostentatious, but which ironically drew immediate attention. A single photograph, taken by a savvy paparazzi who had recognized the reclusive billionaire, was all it took. The headline exploded across Ghanaian and international tabloids within hours. Tech billionaire Benjamin Sterling returns home with mystery woman. Is she the new love of his life? The initial reports were curious, even admiring, but then came the insidious undercurrents. Someone dug into Amara's background, her job at the Gilded Fork, her humble aspirations for a bakery, and her simple life. All were laid bare and twisted. The following day, the headlines turned vicious. Waitress to wife, critics question motives of Sterling's new partner. One particularly cruel blog, notorious for its sensationalism, ran with "from serving tables to serving herself, the gold digger who caught a billionaire." The article painted Amara as a manipulative opportunist, a woman who had strategically targeted Benjamin for his wealth. Her dreams of a simple bakery now spun as a calculated pretense. Amara first saw it in the hushed whispers of her colleagues at the Gilded Fork. Then came the knowing glances, the strained smiles, and finally, the direct pointed questions from friends and family. Her mother, usually her staunchest supporter, called her in tears. "Amara, what have you done? Are these things they're saying true?" The weight of the world's judgment, filtered through the pain of those she loved, was crushing. She felt a profound sense of shame, not for loving Benjamin, but for the way her love was being perceived, for the doubt it cast on her own integrity. Every dream she had worked so hard for now felt tainted by the accusation of greed. Benjamin, meanwhile, was under siege in his own way. His phone was a constant beacon of demands, his PR team frantic about the optics of his new relationship, his business partners worried about the distraction, and a wave of opportunistic friends from his past suddenly reappearing. He was forced to move from his modest Ghanaian apartment, the one he maintained for his normal visits, to his actual sprawling Accra mansion, a fortified estate of high walls and security, a stark contrast to the small world he had shared with Amara. He tried to shield her. He hired the best legal team to fight the defamatory articles, issued strong public statements defending her character, and offered to fly her anywhere in the world to escape the media frenzy. But his efforts, though well-intentioned, were tainted by his past. His first instinct was control, damage control. He was fighting a war he was used to fighting, a war of public perception, of protecting his brand. He was not thinking of her heart, he was thinking of the logistics of reputation management. The turning point, the shatter point, came during a heated argument between them in his vast, impersonal living room. Amara had just seen a particularly cruel segment on a local news channel, showing her restaurant, then a photo of her, then a sneering commentator talking about social climbing. "Why didn't you warn me?" she cried, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "You knew this would happen. You knew what your world was like. Did you really think we could just pretend it didn't exist?" Benjamin, his face grim, paced the polished floors. "I tried to protect you, Amara. I put out statements. I'm taking legal action. Protect me," she interrupted, her voice rising to a raw, painful shout. "You protected your image. You protected your secret. You didn't prepare me for this. You let them call me a gold digger. Did it ever occur to you that what I needed wasn't a PR team but a warning, a choice? You let me walk into this blind. Because you were so busy fighting your own demons, you forgot about mine." His silence was his greatest betrayal. He stood there, his jaw clenched, unable to offer a single word in his defense. Her words were a mirror, reflecting his deepest fear, that he was still the man who would prioritize his secret, his control, over the honesty required to truly love. He saw her pain, the raw, bleeding wound that his choices had inflicted, and he was paralyzed. The very walls he had built to protect himself had now become the weapon that destroyed their love. "I can't do this, Benjamin," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. "I can't live a life where my love is a headline and my integrity is a joke. I can't be with someone who, when push comes to shove, still chooses to protect his secrets over my peace." She turned, her eyes filled with a heartbreaking finality, and walked out of the opulent mansion, leaving him standing amidst his immense wealth, utterly, profoundly alone. The gates of his fortress had opened, not to let her in, but to let her leave. Benjamin's past trauma makes him resort to damage control in a crisis. How does this instinct, despite his love for Amara, become the ultimate barrier between them? Has Benjamin's fear and his wealth finally cost him everything? Share your predictions for his future in the comments section. The cool marble floors of Benjamin's mansion had never felt so cold. The silence in the sprawling rooms was no longer a sanctuary. It was a deafening reminder of his profound and utter loneliness. He walked through his vast art collection, his gaze unfocused, seeing not the priceless masterpieces, but the empty space where Amara's quiet presence should have been. The irony was a bitter taste on his tongue. He had built this fortress to protect himself from the kind of people who only saw his wealth. Yet, by doing so, he had driven away the one person who didn't. He had risked everything for a love that felt pure, and then, in the final moment, his deepest fear had won. He had lost her, not because of a lie, but because of a moment of cowardice. The fear of being betrayed had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He dismissed his PR team with a wave of his hand, their frantic explanations and proposed statements sounding like noise from a different universe. He sat in the center of his living room, a solitary figure surrounded by a fortune that felt completely worthless. He understood now. His problem wasn't a PR crisis. It was a crisis of the soul. He couldn't fix this with money, with lawyers, or with a carefully crafted public image. The only way to win her back was to do the one thing he had never dared to do, to be completely and utterly exposed. Meanwhile, Amara was back in her own life, a life that now felt foreign. The warmth of her family, the comfort of her familiar apartment. It was all there, but a part of her was missing. The public humiliation was a constant stinging presence. Her phone was silent now, but the memories were not. Every time she logged on, the headlines, the brutal comments, and the accusatory whispers felt like a physical weight on her shoulders. Her heart was a battleground, torn between the righteous fury she felt for his betrayal and a desperate, aching longing for the man she had loved. She remembered his confession in Paris, the raw vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't a villain. He was a broken man. But was that enough to forgive a lie that had cost her so much? Her mother's gentle words echoed in her mind. Amara, you can't let the world decide who you are. The truth is yours. Amara knew her mother was right. The world was calling her a gold digger, but she knew the truth. She had loved him when he was just Benjamin, the quiet man in the coffee shop. She had chosen him. But had he chosen her? In that final moment, in the heat of the public scandal, he had chosen his secrets over her. Her pride screamed at her to move on, to rebuild her life without him. But her heart, scarred but not broken, wondered if a love that grand deserved a second chance, a real chance, without any lies. Benjamin made his choice. He rejected the counsel of his advisors. He wouldn't issue a press release. He wouldn't pay to have the articles taken down. His gesture had to be as public and as personal as the pain he had caused. He scheduled a live, unscripted interview with a respected, no-nonsense journalist on a major news network. This was not a pre-planned apology. This was a confession. The day of the interview, the world watched with bated breath. Amara, huddled on her sofa with her mother, felt a knot of dread and morbid curiosity tighten in her stomach. She watched as the camera focused on Benjamin, not in a sleek studio, but in a simple, minimalist living room, a place he said was one of my homes. He looked different. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes were tired, and his expensive suit was noticeably absent. He did not look like a billionaire, but like a man who had not slept. The journalist asked a sharp, pointed question about the scandal and the gold digger waitress. Benjamin did not flinch. His gaze was steady, and his first words were not for the audience, but for her. He spoke directly to the camera, his voice thick with raw emotion. The woman you're calling a gold digger is the most honorable, authentic person I have ever met, he began, his voice breaking. I told her I was just an ordinary man because I was afraid. My past taught me that love and wealth cannot coexist. I was terrified she would be just like the others. But she was not. She fell for me when I had nothing but a worn shirt and a coffee stain on a notebook. I pushed her away because my fear was louder than my love. And in the process, I made her a victim of a lie that was entirely my own. He looked directly into the camera, and his eyes filled with tears. I am not here to defend my wealth. I am here to confess my poverty. The richest man in the world, and I am emotionally bankrupt. Amara, if you are watching, know this. I am done hiding. I am giving up every single one of my secrets. My wealth is a part of me, but it is not all of me. I am a man who loves you, and all I want is a chance to prove that I am a man worthy of your love, not your pity. The camera held on his face as he broke down, a man of immeasurable power, utterly defenseless. The broadcast ended. The world was stunned into a temporary silence. The choice was no longer his, it was hers. Benjamin's public confession is a powerful act of love, but does it truly absolve him of his past deception? What does this gesture cost him personally and professionally? The world is waiting. What will Amara's answer be? Find out in the next and final chapter of this story. The broadcast ended, and a stunned silence fell over Amara's living room. Her mother, who had watched the entire confession with tears in her eyes, reached for her hand. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice full of a mixture of relief and disbelief. That was not a statement. That was a prayer. Amara could only nod, her mind reeling. He had given up his greatest shield. He had confessed to the world that his power meant nothing compared to his profound emotional poverty. He had, with a single public act of courage, undone every lie he had ever told. The shame and hurt that had consumed her for the past week began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming, humbling sense of awe. He had not just asked for her forgiveness, he had earned it. The choice was no longer a matter of pride versus love. It was about accepting a love so grand it was terrifying. She found him at the airport a few hours later, a place that now felt charged with a different kind of possibility. He was not in a private terminal. He was sitting alone in a small, quiet cafe in the main concourse, his gaze fixed on the doors. He was wearing the same simple clothes he had worn for the interview, and he had a coffee cup in his hands, but he wasn't drinking it. He looked up, and when he saw her, the hope in his eyes was so raw, so powerful, that it nearly brought her to her knees. He stood, but he didn't move towards her. He let her come to him. Amara walked up to the table and sat down. She didn't say a word. She simply reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, a perfect, familiar fit. He squeezed her hand, a silent question. She squeezed back, a silent answer. The air between them was filled with everything that didn't need to be said. The apology, the forgiveness, and the immense, terrifying leap of faith. He was the first to speak, his voice low and raspy with emotion. "I am so sorry, Amara, for all of it, for every lie, for every day I let you believe a different truth. I was a coward. I was so afraid of being used that I used you, and for that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Amara looked at him. Her eyes filled with tears, and saw not a billionaire, but a man who was broken, honest, and utterly without a mask. "I know," she whispered. "I know." They talked for hours, not about the interview or the public scandal, but about their future. They spoke about the hard work ahead, the reality of their public relationship, and the challenges they would face. He confessed his deepest fear, that the world would try to drive a wedge between them, to make her life a living hell. She confessed hers, that she would feel like a fraud in his world. Their honesty was a new kind of intimacy, a more profound connection than any grand gesture could have created. "I won't lie to you again," he promised, his voice earnest. "I will not hide. My wealth is a part of me, but it is not all of me. And now you are a part of me, and that is everything." They left the airport and went not to his lavish mansion, but to his simple Accra apartment, the place where he had tried to create his fake life. It was here, in this small, modest space, that they truly began to build their future. He showed her the mundane aspects of his life he had hidden, the comfortable chair where he read, and the worn-out books he loved. He was a man with the world at his fingertips, but he had found his sanctuary in a simple, modest room with her by his side. The following morning, he asked her to show him her bakery project. He didn't ask her to show it. He asked her to take him there. They drove through the city in an unassuming car, a journey that felt like a powerful metaphor for their life together. The shop front was small, empty, and filled with dust, but to Amara it was everything. She walked him through the space, her eyes shining with the light of her dream. She showed him where the ovens would go, where the counter would be, and how the whole space would smell of warm bread and love. He listened, his gaze fixed on her face, captivated not by the empty shop front, but by the passion in her voice. When she was done, he didn't talk about profit margins or business plans. He simply looked at her, his eyes full of love. "This is it," he said, his voice full of a profound understanding. "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, making a call. "I want to put the down payment on the property for Amara's bakery, and then I want you to set up a meeting with my foundation's project manager. I want them to help her build her business, not as an investment, but as a collaboration. No press, no announcements, just help her build her dream." Amara's eyes filled with tears. He wasn't trying to buy her dream. He was trying to protect it. He was not giving her a handout. He was giving her a partnership. It was a love built, not on grand gestures, but on a shared reality. A reality that was messy and public and difficult, but that was all their own. A simple mistake with a fork had led her to a man who had everything, but it was her love that taught him what true wealth really was. The final image is a powerful one. Not a billionaire in a mansion, but a man and a woman, a new couple, standing in a dusty, empty shop. She is in his arms, her head resting on his chest, her heart at peace. The dream was no longer hers alone. It was theirs. And for the first time in his life, the richest man in the world felt truly, completely, and wonderfully at home. The story begins and ends with an object, a misplaced fork, and a future bakery. How do these simple items symbolize the central theme of a love that transcends social class? We hope you enjoyed this journey. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable tales.
Thank you for joining us and watching this story unfold all the way to the end. The fact that you stayed with us means the world. And if you found yourself captivated by every twist and turn of this tale, then I can promise you with absolute certainty that you are going to be completely obsessed with what comes next. It's a story even crazier and more gut-wrenching than you can ever imagine. So don't hesitate. Click on the image showing on your screen right now and dive into your next addiction.